Imagine having your heart shattered in public, only to make a split-second decision that changes your entire life. That's what happened to Megan Davidson. When she caught her boyfriend of 3 years, Marcus Wright, cheating on her at Seattle's exclusive Emerald Lounge, she did something reckless. In a moment of pure rage and humiliation, she walked straight up to the most intimidating stranger in the room and kissed him passionately. What Megan didn't know was that this stranger wasn't just any man. He was Ethan Hayes, the ruthless heir to Seattle's most powerful crime family, and within 24 hours, he would become her new boss, with complete control over her family's financial future. But the twist that no one saw coming? That impulsive kiss didn't just humiliate her ex, it ignited a dangerous attraction between two rivals that would threaten the delicate balance between Seattle's crime families and push them to the brink of war. Tonight's story is about revenge, power, passion, and the unexpected consequences when personal betrayal collides with the dangerous world of family loyalty. Subscribe now, because once this story begins, you won't want to miss a single moment of how one kiss of revenge transformed into a battle for survival, respect, and eventually, something neither of them expected to find in Seattle's criminal underworld. The soft amber lighting of the Emerald Lounge was meant to create an atmosphere of exclusivity and refinement, but tonight it just felt predatory to Megan Davidson. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the smooth jazz filtering through hidden speakers. Her friend's text message burned in her mind. "He's here with her. Don't do anything stupid." Too late for that, and then she saw them. Tucked into a plush velvet booth in the corner was Marcus Wright, her boyfriend of 3 years and underboss to her family's operations in Ballard. And leaning into him, her laughter like shattered crystal, was Aubrey Collins, the daughter of State Senator Collins who'd been in the Wright's pocket for years. Her manicured hand rested possessively on Marcus's thigh, and his fingers were tangled in her platinum blonde hair. It wasn't a friendly chat between crime family associates. It was a final, brutal confirmation. A cold, sharp pain lanced through Megan's chest, so intense it made her gasp. For a moment, she was frozen, a statue of heartbreak and betrayal in the middle of Seattle's most exclusive criminal gathering spot. Then the pain curdled into white-hot rage. She walked toward them, her movement stiff, her vision narrowing until they were the only 2 people in the room. "Marcus," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. He looked up, and the charming smile on his face faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic, then annoyance. "Megan, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," she said, her gaze flicking to Aubrey, who now looked distinctly uncomfortable. Seattle's criminal elite thrived on discretion, and this scene was anything but. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He looked bored, as if the daughter of one of the Davidson family's most respected accountants wasn't worth the effort of an explanation. "Look, Megan, let's not make a scene." "A scene?" she repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You're cheating on me in public, in a lounge where half of Seattle's organizations do business, and you're worried about me making a scene?" He stood up then, his expression hardening into something cruel that she'd only glimpsed before when he was dealing with those who crossed the family. "All right, you want the truth?" he said, his voice low and dismissive. "What did you expect? I need someone who's on my level, someone with connections." "You're comfortable, Megan. You're predictable. The daughter of a bookkeeper. She," he gestured to Aubrey, "is a senator's daughter with federal contacts we need." The public humiliation was a physical blow. He hadn't just broken her heart, he had belittled her, dismissed her family's contributions, made her feel small and worthless in front of people whose respect she'd spent years earning. Tears of fury and shame burned her eyes. She looked at his smug, arrogant face, and a reckless, desperate idea exploded in her mind. She wasn't going to leave in tears. She was going to leave a scar on his massive ego. Her eyes scanned the lounge and landed on a man sitting alone at the bar. He was tall, dark, and impossibly handsome in a dangerous way. Dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her car, he exuded a quiet, intimidating power that commanded attention more effectively than any loud voice ever could. She didn't recognize him, which meant he wasn't from any of the Seattle families she knew. He was without a doubt the most formidable man in the room. Perfect, in a move fueled by pure, unadulterated impulse, Megan turned her back on Marcus. She marched straight to the stranger, who looked up, a flicker of surprise in his steely gray eyes as she approached. She didn't say a word. She reached out, grabbed the lapel of his expensive suit, pulled him forward, and kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a furious, passionate, all-consuming kiss. It was a kiss that poured out 3 years of love and a single night of heartbreak. For a split second, the stranger was still, shocked by her audacity. Then, to her surprise, she felt his hand come up to the small of her back, pulling her closer, responding to the kiss with a controlled, possessive pressure that sent a jolt of electricity through her. She finally pulled away, breathless, her lips tingling. She didn't look at the stranger. She turned and fixed her gaze on Marcus, whose jaw was hanging open in stunned disbelief. The entire Emerald Lounge had gone silent, all eyes on the drama unfolding before them. "Turns out, Marcus," she said, her voice clear and ringing with a triumphant fire, "I was looking for something more exciting too." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked out of the lounge. Her head held high, she left behind her shocked ex-boyfriend, a room full of stunned members of Seattle's criminal elite, and a mysterious, intrigued stranger at the bar without ever having exchanged a single word with him. What she didn't know was that her impulsive act of revenge had just set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the power structure of Seattle's underworld forever. Monday morning at Hayes Investment Partners was a frantic, caffeine-fueled haze. Megan threw herself into her work, using complex financial spreadsheets and audit reports as a shield against the emotional hangover from the weekend. She had successfully avoided Marcus's barrage of angry texts and calls, but the memory of her own reckless act kissing a complete stranger made her cheeks burn every time she thought of it. It had been a moment of insane, satisfying madness, but now, in the harsh light of day, it just felt dangerous. Around 10 a.m., a palpable buzz swept through the office. An email marked with the highest level of urgency had landed in every employee's inbox. Subject: Emergency all-hands meeting. Mandatory attendance. The body of the email was brief and world-shattering. Hayes Investment Partners had acquired controlling interest in the financial operations of several Ballard businesses. Effective immediately, they were now handling the books for businesses that had been under the Reynolds family protection for decades. A town hall meeting was scheduled for 11 a.m. to introduce the new partner who would oversee the transition. The conference room was packed, the air thick with nervous energy and whispered speculation. Megan stood in the middle of the crowd with her colleagues, making anxious jokes to mask her own rising panic. "Well, there goes any semblance of independence," her deskmate Grace muttered. "I hear the Hayes organization are sharks. They've been trying to move into Ballard for years." "I just hope the new partner appreciates our work," Megan whispered back, "and keeps us employed, instead of bringing in their own people." At precisely 11 a.m., the company's director of operations, a nervous-looking man named Thompson, walked to the front of the room. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "As you know, this is a day of significant transition for our firm. It is my great honor to introduce the visionary leader who will be guiding us into this new and exciting future. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our new managing partner, Mr. Ethan Hayes." A man walked into the room from the side door, and Megan's world stopped. It was him, the stranger from the Emerald Lounge. He was even more formidable in daylight, his presence commanding the entire room. He wore the same quiet power like a custom-tailored suit. His cool gray eyes swept across the crowd, analytical and assessing. Then they found her. His gaze locked onto hers from across the room. There was no visible change in his stony expression, but she saw it, a flicker of something in his eyes, a spark of recognition, a flash of surprise, and something else, something that looked terrifyingly like amusement. He knew her. Her heart, which had stopped moments before, now began to hammer against her ribs so hard she thought it might break. She felt the blood drain from her face. Ethan Hayes delivered a speech about strategic partnerships, operational efficiency, and a new era of financial collaboration. It was a standard, bloodless corporate speech, but coming from him, every word felt like a personal threat. He spoke of the newly acquired accounts in Ballard businesses that Megan knew were fronts for the Davidson family's operations, with the casual confidence of a predator claiming new territory. After the speech, as the stunned employees began to disperse, Ethan Hayes moved through the crowd like a shark parting a school of fish, his presence silencing conversations as he passed. Megan tried to shrink into the background, praying he would just walk past. He didn't. He stopped directly in front of her. Her colleagues instinctively took a step back, leaving her isolated, standing before him. "Miss Davidson, isn't it?" he said, his voice calm and low. Yet, it carried an authority that made the hairs on her arms stand up. His eyes, however, were anything but calm. They were glinting with a dangerous, knowing light. "I was reviewing the personnel files this morning, promising talent in financial forensics." He extended his hand. It was not a friendly gesture. It was a command. Numbly, she placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, his skin warm, and the brief contact sent a jolt of memory through her of the bar, of his hand on her back during that kiss. "I'd like to see you in my new office in 5 minutes," he said, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "We have a great deal to discuss about your future with this firm. And your family's interests in Ballard." The 5-minute walk to the managing partner's office felt like a mile-long journey to the gallows. Megan's legs were trembling, her mind a chaotic whirlwind of panic and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. It was a cosmic joke of the cruelest kind. She had kissed a rival family's heir, a man who now controlled her family's financial infrastructure. She knocked on the heavy oak door, her knuckles barely making a sound. "Enter," a calm, controlled voice commanded. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office, once the familiar, slightly cluttered space of the previous managing partner, had been transformed. It was now a minimalist fortress of glass and steel, dominated by a massive desk and a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline and Elliott Bay beyond. Ethan Hayes stood by the window, his back to her, looking out at his new domain. "Close the door," he said without turning around. She did as she was told, the soft click of the latch echoing in the silent, cavernous room. He turned slowly, a predator savoring the moment. His face was a mask of cool indifference, but his eyes were dancing with a dark, mocking amusement. "What a performance, Miss Davidson," he began, his voice a low, smooth purr. "I must admit, it was the most memorable introduction I've ever had to a new employee." He began to walk slowly toward her, circling her as if she were a piece of art he was considering acquiring. The audacity, the passion, the sheer reckless impulsiveness of it all, truly remarkable. "Mr. Hayes," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I am so sorry. I had no idea who you were. It was a mistake, a terrible, unprofessional—" "A mistake?" he interrupted, stopping directly in front of her. "Oh, I don't think so. It was a calculated move, a desperate, emotional, but calculated move to wound an adversary. And it was very, very effective." He was so close, she could smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne, the same scent from the bar, a subtle blend of sandalwood and something darker, more dangerous. "The problem, Megan," he said, his voice dropping, using her first name for the first time, a deliberate act of intimacy that felt like a threat, "is that your passion and your recklessness are now my assets, and I cannot have my assets behaving in such an unpredictable manner." She braced herself, expecting the inevitable. Her family had been trying to maintain their independence from the larger crime organizations for years. Now, because of her impulsive act, they were about to lose everything. "I understand. I'll clear out my desk and inform my family of the change in circumstances." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Fire you?" "Oh no. That would be far too simple. Firing you would mean I don't get to enjoy the delightful irony of this situation, and I do so love irony." He moved back to his desk, a new dangerous glint in his eye. "No, you're not fired, but your previous position in the accounts receivable department no longer exists." A cold dread washed over her. "What? From this moment on, you are my personal financial advisor," he announced, the title sounding both like a promotion and a prison sentence. "You will report directly and only to me. You will work on all my priority accounts, particularly the new acquisitions in Ballard. You will be at my beck and call. Your desk will be moved to the anteroom just outside this office." He had her. He had isolated her from her team, from her colleagues, from any semblance of her old work life. He had placed her directly under his thumb in a position where she would have to see him, interact with him, every single day. And worse, he'd positioned her as the liaison between his organization and her family's businesses. "Consider this a unique opportunity, Megan," he said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "An opportunity to prove that your passion is not limited to dramatic displays in lounges. You want it to be exciting. Well, your life is about to get very exciting indeed." She stood there frozen, realizing the full extent of her nightmare. She hadn't just kissed a stranger. She had kissed her new boss, her new tormentor, the man who now held her entire family's financial operations in the palm of his hand. Her one-night act of revenge had just turned into a long-term sentence. "And one more thing," he added, leaning back against his desk, arms folded across his broad chest. "Your ex-boyfriend, Marcus Wright. I understand his father is a lieutenant in the Davidson organization. Megan swallowed hard. Yes, excellent. I'll be meeting with the Davidson family leadership tomorrow evening at the Fairmont Olympic. They'll want to discuss this new arrangement. As my financial advisor, you'll attend, of course. My family doesn't know about what happened at the Emerald Lounge, she said, her voice barely audible. His smile widened, showing perfect white teeth. No? Well, that should make for an interesting meeting, don't you think? I wonder what Mr. Wright will have to say about our little encounter. The game was clear now. He wasn't just using her financial expertise. He was using her as a pawn in a larger power play, leveraging her connection to both organizations, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. Be here at 7 tomorrow morning, he said dismissively. We have a lot of work to do before that meeting. The next morning, Megan's world had been completely upended. Her desk, once nestled in the noisy, collaborative chaos of the accounts receivable department, was now located in the silent, sterile anteroom outside Ethan's office. It was a beautiful, lonely island. Her former colleagues would walk past, offering her small, pitying smiles or avoiding her gaze altogether. She was no longer one of them. She was now the personal financial advisor to Ethan Hayes, a title that dripped with suspicion and unspoken questions. Ethan wasted no time in assigning her first project. He called her into his office, the glint of challenge in his eyes. Your first task is to reorganize the accounts for the Davidson family's operations in Ballard, he announced, his tone deceptively casual. Megan's blood ran cold. The Davidson financial operations were complex, deliberately convoluted to keep law enforcement and rival families from understanding the true flow of money. They had been structured that way by her own father before he had retired and passed his role to her. I want to see every business, every shell company, every offshore account, he continued, leaning back in his chair. I want to know where the money comes from, where it goes, and who controls each step. I want to see all the weaknesses, all the vulnerabilities. It was an impossible request. A request designed to make her choose between betraying her family or failing at her new role. Either option would put her in an untenable position. Those records are protected, she said carefully. Many of them exist only in the heads of the family accountants. Like your father? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Daniel Davidson, senior accountant for the family for over 30 years. Recently retired to Bainbridge Island, if my information is correct. The casual mention of her father sent a chill down Megan's spine. It wasn't just a display of knowledge, it was a threat. I need those records by tonight's meeting, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I'm sure you'll find a way to be persuasive with your family. For the next 10 hours, Megan worked in a state of quiet panic. She called in favors, reached out to old family contacts, and carefully extracted information without revealing the true purpose. She walked a tightrope of half-truths and omissions, gathering just enough information to satisfy Ethan without giving away the family's most critical secrets. As evening approached, she sat in Ethan's office, presenting him with a carefully curated version of the Davidson financial structure. It was accurate but incomplete, showing him what he needed to see while protecting the core of her family's operations. Impressive work in such a short time, he said, studying the documents with an intensity that made her nervous. His eyes flickered up to meet hers. But this isn't everything. It's what I could access on short notice, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I see. He closed the folder and stood up. Time will tell if it's enough. The car is waiting downstairs to take us to the meeting. The ride to the Fairmont Olympic Hotel was silent and tense. Ethan sat beside her in the back of a sleek black Audi, reviewing notes on his tablet, occasionally glancing at her with an unreadable expression. Megan stared out the window, watching the familiar Seattle streets blur past, feeling like she was being driven to her own execution. The Fairmont Olympic was Seattle's grande dame of luxury hotels, a historic landmark where the city's elite had conducted business for nearly a century. As they walked through the ornate lobby, Megan was acutely aware of the eyes tracking their movement, security personnel disguised as hotel staff, watching for threats. Ethan guided her with a hand at the small of her back, the same spot he had touched during their kiss, to a private dining room in the back of the hotel's restaurant. As the doors opened, Megan's heart sank. Seated around a large table were the key members of the Davidson organization. Her uncle Robert, the current head of the family, her cousin James, who handled enforcement, and there, looking like thunder, was Gerald Wright and his son Marcus. Marcus's eyes widened in shock when he saw her enter with Ethan, then narrowed in fury. Gerald's expression remained impassive, but she could see the calculation behind his eyes. This was bad. This was very, very bad. Gentlemen, Ethan said smoothly, pulling out a chair for Megan before taking his own seat at the head of the table. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I believe you all know my new financial advisor, Miss Davidson." "What is the meaning of this?" Gerald Wright demanded, glaring at Megan. "Why is she here?" "Miss Davidson has intimate knowledge of your family's financial operations," Ethan replied coolly. "She'll be overseeing the transition of your accounts to Hayes Investment Partners." "This is an outrage," Marcus sputtered, his face flushed with anger. "She's a Davidson. Her loyalties are compromised." Ethan's smile was razor-sharp. "Are they? I thought you had recently severed ties with Miss Davidson. Rather publicly, if I recall." The room went dead silent. All eyes turned to Marcus, whose face had gone from angry red to ashen white. Megan sat frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. Ethan knew exactly what had happened at the Emerald Lounge, and he was using it as a weapon. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus finally managed, his voice strained. "No?" Ethan's voice was silky with mock surprise. "Perhaps Miss Davidson can refresh your memory about the events at the Emerald Lounge on Friday night?" Before Megan could speak, her uncle Robert cut in, his voice tense with barely controlled anger. "What exactly happened at the Emerald Lounge?" he demanded, looking between Megan and Marcus. The moment of truth had arrived. Megan took a deep breath, her mind racing. If she revealed Marcus's betrayal and her impulsive kiss with Ethan, she would be throwing both herself and Marcus to the wolves. Family business was supposed to stay private, but if she lied, Ethan would simply reveal it himself, and she would look weak. "Marcus was at the Emerald Lounge with Senator Collins's daughter," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I confronted him, and things got heated." "She made a scene," Marcus interjected quickly, trying to regain control of the narrative. "She embarrassed the family in front of half of Seattle's organizations." "And how did Miss Davidson embarrass the family exactly?" Ethan asked, his eyes never leaving Megan's face, daring her to tell the complete truth. Gerald Wright slammed his hand on the table. "Enough of this soap opera nonsense. We're here to discuss business. Hayes, you've forced your way into Ballard. What do you want?" Ethan leaned back, seemingly satisfied with the chaos he had sown. "Simple. The Davidson organization has operated independently for too long. Your financial operations are inefficient, vulnerable. I'm offering structure, protection, and legitimacy." "In exchange for what?" Robert Davidson asked, his eyes narrowed. 30% of your Ballard operations and exclusive rights to handle all your international transactions." The demand was outrageous. The Davidson family had fought for decades to maintain their independence from larger organizations. Giving up 30% would be tantamount to surrendering their autonomy. "That's robbery," Gerald snarled. "It's business," Ethan corrected smoothly. "And a generous offer, considering the alternatives." "What alternatives?" James Davidson asked, speaking for the first time. Ethan nodded to Megan. "Show them." With trembling hands, Megan opened the folder she had brought and distributed copies of a document she hadn't seen before. As she scanned it, her blood ran cold. It was a detailed analysis of the Davidson family's most vulnerable operations information she hadn't provided, but that Ethan had clearly obtained elsewhere. "As you can see," Ethan continued, "I already have enough information to cause significant disruption to your operations. The IRS would be particularly interested in pages 3 through 5. The implications were clear. Ethan wasn't just negotiating, he was threatening. "You son of a bitch," Marcus hissed, half rising from his chair. Gerald grabbed his arm, forcing him back down. "And where does she fit into all this?" Robert nodded toward Megan. "My own niece working for you, is that part of your leverage?" "Miss Davidson has valuable expertise," Ethan replied. "Her presence ensures a smooth transition and protects your family's interests. Think of her as your representative in my organization." The words sent a shiver down Megan's spine. He wasn't just using her knowledge, he was using her as a hostage, a guarantee of her family's cooperation. "I need time to consider this," Robert said finally, his expression grim. "You have until tomorrow evening," Ethan replied, standing to signal the end of the meeting. "Miss Davidson will contact you for your answer." As they prepared to leave, Marcus suddenly stepped in front of Megan, his voice low and venomous. "You little traitor, you've been feeding him information, haven't you? That's why you were at the Emerald Lounge, to set me up." Before Megan could respond, Ethan was there, his presence a wall between her and Marcus. "Mr. Wright," Ethan said, his voice deceptively calm but laced with steel. "I suggest you step back. Miss Davidson is under my protection now. Any discourtesy to her will be considered a discourtesy to me." The threat was unmistakable. Marcus paled and stepped back, hatred burning in his eyes. As Ethan guided her from the room, his hand possessively at the small of her back, Megan realized with a sinking heart that she was now trapped between two dangerous forces, her family's suspicion and Ethan Hayes' mysterious agenda. The ride back to the Hayes office building was silent. Ethan seemed lost in thought, occasionally glancing at Megan with an inscrutable expression. When they arrived, she expected to be dismissed, but instead, he led her back to his office. "Drink?" he offered, walking to a hidden panel that revealed a well-stocked bar. "No, thank you," she replied stiffly, standing by the door, ready to escape at the first opportunity. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and took a slow, contemplative sip. "You did well tonight." "Did I?" Her voice was bitter. "I just helped you threaten my family." "I'm pretty sure that doesn't qualify as doing well. Your family will be better off under Hayes' protection. The Wrights have been dragging the Davidson organization down for years." She stared at him in surprise. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know things, Megan." He turned to face her fully. "The Wrights have been skimming from Davidson operations, making side deals with the East Side groups. Your uncle is too loyal to see it." This was news to Megan, but it aligned with suspicions her father had expressed before retiring. Still, she wasn't about to show her cards. "Why am I really here, Mr. Hayes? What do you want from me?" He approached her slowly, like a predator stalking prey. "Initially, I wanted to use your knowledge of Davidson finances to gain leverage, but now..." He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne again. "Now I find myself curious about the woman who would kiss a complete stranger just to wound a man who betrayed her." Her cheeks burned at the memory. It was a mistake. A moment of insanity. "Was it?" His voice dropped lower. "You didn't strike me as insane. You struck me as passionate, decisive, dangerous. Even..." The way he said, "dangerous," sent a forbidden thrill down her spine, which she immediately tried to suppress. "I should go," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's late. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., he replied, stepping back and breaking the tension. "We have follow-up work to do before the Davidsons deliver their answer." She nodded and fled, her heart racing with confusion and a disturbing attraction she refused to acknowledge. The next morning, Megan arrived to find her new desk occupied by a large, expensive arrangement of white orchids with a simple note. "For your first successful negotiation. E.H." She was staring at it in confusion when Grace appeared, eyes wide at the extravagant display. "From the boss?" she whispered, glancing nervously at Ethan's closed door. "It's not what you think," Megan said quickly. "It's just about a meeting last night." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Whatever you say. But listen, be careful. There are rumors spreading about why you got this promotion so quickly." Megan's heart sank. "What kind of rumors?" "That you and Hayes had some kind of encounter before he took over. And that's why he singled you out." The irony was almost laughable. The rumors were true, but not in the way people assumed. Before Megan could respond, Ethan's door opened. "Miss Davidson, a word," he called, his expression unreadable. Inside his office, Ethan was pacing, his usual composure disturbed. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Marcus Wright has been talking, spreading his own version of what happened at the Emerald Lounge." Megan's stomach dropped. "What version is that? That you've been working as my informant for months? That you staged the scene at the lounge to create a pretext for the Hayes organization to move into Ballard? That's ridiculous. I didn't even know who you were." "Your family doesn't know that," he pointed out. "And the Wrights are using this to position themselves as the loyal protectors of Davidson interests, with you as the traitor." She sank into a chair, the implications hitting her full force. "They won't just fire me. If they believe I betrayed the family..." She didn't need to finish. In their world, betrayal had consequences far worse than unemployment. Ethan's expression darkened. "I won't let that happen." The fierce protectiveness in his voice surprised her. For a moment, he didn't look like the calculating businessman or the ruthless crime heir. He looked genuinely concerned. "Why do you care what happens to me?" she asked, genuinely perplexed. He seemed startled by the question, as if he hadn't asked himself the same thing. Before he could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. "It's your uncle," he said, putting the phone on speaker. "Hayes," Robert Davidson's voice crackled through, sounding strained. "We need to meet. Tonight. The situation has escalated." "What's happened?" "The Wrights are making moves. They've convinced half my lieutenants that Megan has been working for you. They're calling for a family vote to cut her loose. Ethan's eyes met Megan's, and she saw something she hadn't expected. Anger on her behalf. Where and when? Ethan asked, his voice controlled but tight. Canlis. Private room. 8 o'clock. Canlis was perched on the hillside of Queen Anne, offering panoramic views of Lake Union and the Seattle skyline. It was one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, where a private dining room could cost as much as a monthly mortgage payment. As Ethan's car pulled up to the entrance, Megan felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. "What's the plan?" she asked. Smoothing her black dress nervously, Ethan adjusted his cufflinks, looking impossibly calm for someone walking into a potential ambush. "We listen to what they have to say, then we show our hand." "And what exactly is our hand?" "You'll see." His cryptic answer did nothing to calm her nerves. A host led them to a private room at the back of the restaurant, where the Davidson family inner circle was already assembled. Robert sat at the head of the table, looking older than Megan had ever seen him. Gerald Wright sat at his right hand, his expression smug. Marcus was there too, pointedly avoiding Megan's gaze. What surprised her most was the presence of her father, Daniel Davidson, who had supposedly retired from family business months ago. "Dad?" she said, unable to hide her shock. "What are you doing here?" Before he could answer, Gerald Wright spoke up. "We thought it appropriate to have your father present when we discuss your betrayal." Megan's father's face remained impassive, but she could see the worry in his eyes. They had always been close, and her father had taught her everything about the family business, including the importance of loyalty. "There's been no betrayal," Ethan said smoothly, pulling out a chair for Megan before taking his own seat. "Unless you count Mr. Wright Jr.'s indiscretion with Senator Collins's daughter." Marcus flushed angrily. "This isn't about me. It's about her feeding you information for months." "Enough," Robert cut in. "We're here to settle this matter once and for all." He turned to Megan, his expression grave. "Niece, we have evidence that you've been in contact with the Hayes organization for at least 3 months prior to their move into Ballard. Phone records show calls to numbers associated with Hayes businesses." Megan's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I never—" "The records don't lie," Gerald said, sliding a folder across the table. Ethan picked it up, examined the contents, and let out a soft laugh. "Impressive forgery, right? But sloppy." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Before we continue this farce, I think everyone should hear this." He pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the room. "Dad, I've doctored the phone records like you asked. They'll believe she's been talking to Hayes people for months. With her out of the way, we can push for control of the Ballard operations ourselves." Gerald Wright's face contorted with rage. "Where did you get that?" "You should be more careful about what you discuss in your car," Ethan replied calmly. "It seems you've had your own people under surveillance for some time." Megan looked at her father, whose expression had shifted from concern to cold fury as he realized the Wrights' deception. "There's more," Ethan continued, producing a second file. "Financial records showing the Wrights have been skimming 20% off the top of Davidson operations for the past 2 years, money that should have gone to the family." Robert Davidson's face hardened as he examined the documents. "Is this true, Gerald?" "This is all fabricated," Gerald blustered, but his confidence was visibly shaken. Daniel Davidson spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but authoritative. "No, it's not. I've suspected for months. It's why I retired. I couldn't prove it. And no one would listen." Robert's hands clenched into fists. "You betrayed me, Gerald. After 30 years. The only betrayal here," Ethan interjected smoothly, "is from the Wrights. Megan has been loyal to her family. Her only crime was kissing me at the Emerald Lounge after catching Marcus with his new political connection." Every eye in the room turned to Megan, then to Marcus, who looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "Is this true?" Robert demanded. Marcus's silence was answer enough. "It was a personal matter," Megan said quietly. "I never intended for it to affect family business. I didn't even know who Mr. Hayes was until he showed up at the office." A tense silence fell over the room. Robert exchanged a long look with Daniel, some unspoken communication passing between the old friends. "The Wrights are out," Robert finally declared. "Effective immediately. No retaliation, no dispute. You take what you came with and nothing more." Gerald half rose from his chair. "You can't." "I can and I have," Robert cut him off. "Be grateful I'm letting you walk out of here at all." Marcus and Gerald left, their faces twisted with impotent rage and humiliation. As the door closed behind them, Robert turned to Ethan. "As for your proposal, Mr. Hayes, I'm prepared to accept a 15% partnership, not 30, and joint control of international transactions. Ethan smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. I believe we can work with that. After the meeting at Canlis, a new equilibrium settled over Seattle's criminal landscape. The Wrights were exiled to the outskirts of the organization's territory, stripped of their power and influence. The Hayes-Davidson partnership moved forward, strengthening both families' positions in the city's underworld. For Megan, however, the situation remained complicated. She was no longer viewed as a traitor by her family, but her connection to Ethan Hayes raised eyebrows. Her role as liaison between the families placed her in an ambiguous position, neither fully Hayes nor fully Davidson, but something in between. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Ethan called her into his office. Unlike previous meetings, his posture was relaxed, almost casual as he leaned against his desk. Your work on integrating the accounts has been exceptional, he said, gesturing to the reports she'd prepared. You've saved both organizations considerable trouble. Thank you, she replied, surprised by the genuine praise. It helps that I understand both sides of the equation. He studied her for a moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. That's precisely why I have a proposition for you. Another one? She asked warily. His lips quirked in amusement. A legitimate one this time. I want to create a new position, Director of Joint Operations. You'd oversee all shared business ventures between Hayes and Davidson, reporting directly to both families but operating independently. Megan blinked in surprise. That sounds like a promotion. It is, with a corresponding increase in compensation and autonomy. She narrowed her eyes, searching for the catch. Why me? You could put one of your own people in that position. My people don't have your unique perspective, or your loyalty to both sides. He paused, his expression becoming more serious. Despite everything, you've never compromised your family's interests, even when it would have been easy to do so. The acknowledgement caught her off guard. I thought that frustrated you. Initially, yes. Now I see it as an asset. This partnership needs someone who understands both worlds and can be trusted by both sides. She considered his offer, turning it over in her mind. The position would give her independence, authority, and a chance to protect her family's interests while working with Hayes. It was an elegant solution to her precarious position. I accept, she said finally, but I have conditions. His eyebrow rose. Such as, I want my own office, not an anteroom, and I choose my own team. A slow smile spread across his face. Done. And one more thing, she added, her heart racing slightly. I want to know why you really responded to that kiss at the Emerald Lounge. The question hung in the air between them, bold and dangerous. For a moment, she thought she'd gone too far, crossed a line they'd both been carefully avoiding. Ethan pushed away from his desk and moved toward her, closing the distance until he was standing directly in front of her. The familiar scent of his cologne enveloped her, bringing back visceral memories of that night. Because, he said softly, his voice dropping to a register that sent a shiver down her spine. In a world of calculated moves and strategic alliances, you were the first genuine surprise I'd experienced in years. He reached up, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face, the touch feather-light but electric. And I find that I like being surprised by you, Megan Davidson. The air between them crackled with tension, months of power plays and forced proximity finally giving way to the attraction that had simmered beneath the surface since that first impulsive kiss. This is a bad idea, she whispered, even as she found herself leaning slightly toward him. Probably, he agreed, his eyes never leaving hers. Another thing you should know about me. I have a fondness for bad ideas with potentially extraordinary outcomes. This time, when his lips met hers, there was no audience, no revenge plot, no impulsive anger driving the connection. There was only the slow, deliberate exploration of a possibility that had been building between them from the moment she'd grabbed his lapel at the Emerald Lounge. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Megan found herself facing yet another complication in her already complex life. But as she looked up at Ethan's face, seeing not the cold crime lord or the calculating businessman but simply a man who had revealed a vulnerability just for her, she realized that some complications might be worth the risk. So, he said, his voice husky as he rested his forehead against hers. Director of Joint Operations. When can you start? She smiled, her first genuine smile in his presence. I already have. 6 months into her role as Director of Joint Operations, Megan had transformed the position from a nebulous concept into a powerhouse division. Her office, located on a neutral floor between the Hayes and Davidson operations, had become a hub of activity. She had carefully selected a team of trusted professionals from both organizations, creating a balanced unit that answered to her alone. The partnership between the families had proven surprisingly profitable. With the Wrights' corruption eliminated and the Hayes organization's superior international connections, both families were thriving. Megan's intimate knowledge of both worlds made her uniquely qualified to identify opportunities and navigate potential conflicts. Her personal relationship with Ethan had evolved as well, though they maintained strict professionalism during business hours. They were careful, discreet, a necessary precaution in their world, where personal connections could be perceived as weaknesses to exploit. On a crisp autumn evening, Megan was working late in her office when her phone rang. It was Grace, her voice tight with urgency. "The Wrights are back," she said without preamble. "Marcus and Gerald were spotted at the Emerald Lounge an hour ago, meeting with representatives from the East Side organization." Megan's blood ran cold. The East Side organization was the largest rival to both Hayes and Davidson interests. If the Wrights were forming an alliance with them, it could only mean one thing: revenge. "Does Ethan know?" she asked, already gathering her things. "Not yet. He's at that charity event at the Fairmont Olympic. I'll handle it. Keep me posted if you hear anything else." She headed directly to the Fairmont, where Seattle's elite had gathered for a black tie fundraiser. It was the type of event where the city's legitimate business leaders mingled with its more shadowy power brokers, all under the veneer of philanthropy. Megan spotted Ethan immediately. He stood out in any crowd, but tonight, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, he commanded attention. He was engaged in conversation with the mayor and several city council members, connections that were valuable to both families' legitimate business interests. She made her way toward him, navigating through the well-dressed crowd. Just as she was about to reach him, a familiar voice stopped her cold. Well, if it isn't the traitor herself. She turned to find Marcus Wright blocking her path, a glass of champagne in his hand and hatred in his eyes. He looked thinner, harder than when she'd last seen him, the months of exile having stripped away his polished veneer. "Move aside, Marcus. I have nothing to say to you." "That's too bad, because I have plenty to say to you." His voice was low, but venomous. "You think you've won, don't you? Playing both sides, sleeping with the enemy. You're drunk, and dangerously close to violating the terms of your exile." He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Terms? There are no terms anymore. My father and I have new friends now. Powerful friends who are very interested in the Hayes-Davidson arrangement. The East Side organization won't protect you when Robert finds out you violated his directive." Something ugly flashed in Marcus's eyes. "Robert won't be giving directives much longer. Things are about to change in this city." The threat was unmistakable. Before Megan could respond, Ethan appeared at her side, his presence like a wall between her and Marcus. "Mr. Wright," he said, his voice deceptively pleasant. "I believe you were just leaving." Marcus's gaze shifted between them, his face twisting with disgust. The happy couple. Enjoy it while it lasts. He brushed past them, deliberately bumping Megan's shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. Ethan's hand shot out to steady her, his fingers lingering protectively at her elbow. "What was that about?" he asked once Marcus was out of earshot. Quickly, she filled him in on Grace's information and Marcus's thinly veiled threats. Ethan's expression darkened with each word. "We need to warn Robert," he said, already reaching for his phone. "There's more," Megan added, lowering her voice. "The way Marcus was talking, I think they're planning something against my uncle." Ethan's eyes met hers, understanding passing between them. "We need to move now." They left the charity event immediately, Ethan making a brief excuse to his business associates. In the car, he made a series of rapid calls, mobilizing his security team, while Megan tried repeatedly to reach her uncle. Robert wasn't answering. "This isn't like him," she said, anxiety tightening her chest. "He always answers my calls, especially after hours." Ethan's hand covered hers, a brief reassuring pressure. "We'll find him. Where would he be at this hour? If he's not at home, he might be at Giacomo's in the North End. Thursday nights he usually has dinner with my father and the senior family members." Ethan directed his driver to head to the restaurant immediately. As they sped through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle, Megan's phone rang a call from her father. "Dad, is Uncle Robert with you?" Her father's voice was tense, hushed. "No, and that's the problem. He never showed for dinner. I've been calling him for an hour." "Where are you now?" "Still at Giacomo's with the others. We were about to send someone to his house." "Don't," Megan said sharply. "The Wrights are back, and they're working with the East Side organization. I think they're targeting Robert." There was a moment of silence. Then her father's voice, controlled but laced with fury. "Where are you?" "On my way to Giacomo's with Ethan Hayes." Another pause. "Good. We'll wait for you." When they arrived at the restaurant, the back room was filled with senior Davidson family members, their faces grim. Daniel Davidson rose to greet them, nodding respectfully to Ethan before embracing his daughter. "Any word?" she asked. "Nothing," her father replied. "His security detail isn't answering either." Ethan stepped forward, his presence commanding the room's attention. "My people have eyes on the Wright family compound. Gerald left 30 minutes ago with 4 men. Marcus is still at the Fairmont." "Do we know where Gerald was headed?" one of the Davidson lieutenants asked. Before Ethan could answer, Megan's phone buzzed with a text message. Her blood froze as she read it. "It's from Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He says if we want to see Robert alive, I need to come alone to Pier 66. Just me." "It's a trap," her father said immediately. "Obviously," Ethan agreed, his face hardening into the cold mask of the crime lord. "But it's also an opportunity." He outlined a plan quickly, a pincer movement with Davidson forces approaching from the waterside, while Hayes' men secured the perimeter of the pier. Megan would appear to arrive alone but would be covered by snipers positioned on adjacent rooftops. "And what about me?" she asked, knowing she couldn't be sidelined in a situation she had inadvertently helped create. Ethan's eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw conflict there, the protectiveness of the man warring with the strategic mind of the organization leader. "You'll wear a wire," he said finally. "And body armor. You'll stall them while our people get into position." Her father started to protest, but Megan cut him off. "I'll do it. This started with me. I need to be part of ending it." An hour later, Megan walked alone onto Pier 66, the wind off Elliott Bay cutting through her coat despite the concealed body armor underneath. The tourist attraction was deserted at this hour, the iconic observation deck dark against the night sky. She spotted Gerald Wright standing at the far end of the pier, flanked by 2 men. There was no sign of her uncle. "That's far enough," Gerald called as she approached. "I'm surprised Hayes let his pet come alone." "Where's my uncle?" she demanded, ignoring the jab. Gerald smiled, a cold, triumphant expression. "Concerned about family now? After you betrayed us to Hayes?" "I never betrayed anyone. You did that yourself when you started skimming from Davidson businesses." His face darkened with anger. "You destroyed years of careful work with your impulsive little display at the Emerald Lounge. Everything we had built, gone because you couldn't handle being dumped." "Where is Robert?" she repeated, her hand slipping into her pocket to activate the signal that would tell Ethan's and her father's men to move in. Gerald nodded to one of his men, who stepped aside to reveal Robert Davidson, bound to a chair, a bruise darkening one side of his face but very much alive. Relief washed through Megan, but she kept her expression neutral. "What do you want, Gerald?" Gerald's smile widened, revealing a predatory gleam. "Simple. A reversal of fortunes. The Hayes-Davidson partnership ends tonight. You're going to call Hayes and tell him that your uncle has decided to align with the East Side organization instead. Then you'll contact your father and tell him the same thing." "And if I refuse?" Gerald shrugged, pulling a gun from his jacket and pointing it casually at Robert's head. "Then the Davidson family will need a new leader. Perhaps Marcus is ready for that responsibility." Megan fought to keep her expression neutral, knowing she needed to stall for just a few more minutes while the teams got into position. "This is short-sighted, Gerald. Even if you kill him, the Hayes organization won't back down. They'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." "They might," Gerald conceded. "But with the backing of the East Side group, we'll be ready for them. Your boyfriend may control downtown and the waterfront, but he's about to lose everything else." Behind Gerald, almost imperceptible in the shadows, Megan spotted movement Hayes men taking position. She needed to keep Gerald talking. "Where does Marcus fit into this plan?" He seemed pretty confident at the Fairmont. Gerald's expression soured slightly. "My son has his uses, but he let his ego get the better of him when it came to you. He should have kept you close instead of throwing you away. So I could be what your spy in the Hayes organization?" "Precisely. Instead, you became Hayes's greatest asset. The perfect bridge between our worlds." Gerald's voice hardened. "A bridge we're about to burn. Now make the call." He thrust a burner phone toward her. Megan reached for it slowly, her mind racing. She just needed a few more seconds. A sudden movement from Robert caught everyone's attention. Despite his bonds, he had managed to knock his chair sideways, creating a distraction. In that split second, the night erupted into chaos. Ethan's men emerged from the shadows, weapons drawn. Shots rang out from the rooftops as the snipers took down Gerald's outer security perimeter. Simultaneously, Davidson forces swarmed onto the pier from the waterside, having approached silently by boat. Gerald, realizing he was trapped, grabbed Megan, pressing his gun to her temple. "Back off or she dies," he shouted. The advancing forces hesitated, creating a tense standoff. Through her earpiece, Megan could hear Ethan's controlled voice. "Hold positions. Let her go, Gerald," Robert called from his fallen position. "It's over. It's not over until I say it's over." Gerald snarled, the gun pressing painfully against Megan's skull. "I want safe passage out of Seattle for me and my son." "That's not going to happen," came a new voice, cold and commanding. Ethan Hayes stepped into the light, his expression terrifying in its calm intensity. He moved forward slowly, hands empty and visible at his sides. "One more step and I'll kill her," Gerald threatened, his arm tightening around Megan's throat. "If you harm her," Ethan replied, his voice deceptively conversational, "there won't be a place on this earth where you can hide from me. I will dedicate every resource, every connection, every dollar I have to finding you, and when I do, and I will, death will seem like mercy compared to what follows." The absolute certainty in his voice sent a chill down Megan's spine, even though the threat wasn't directed at her. Gerald's grip loosened slightly, the gun wavering. Sensing his uncertainty, Megan made her move. Drawing on self-defense training her father had insisted upon years ago, she drove her elbow hard into Gerald's solar plexus, while simultaneously twisting away from the gun. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the air as Gerald doubled over, gasping for breath. In an instant, Ethan was there, delivering a powerful blow to Gerald's jaw that sent him crumpling to the ground. Hayes and Davidson men swarmed the pier, securing Gerald and his remaining associates. Someone cut Robert free from his bonds while medical personnel checked him for injuries. Megan found herself suddenly engulfed in Ethan's arms, his embrace tight enough to crush the breath from her lungs. "Don't ever do that again," he muttered against her hair, his voice rough with an emotion she'd never heard from him before. "Fear." She pulled back just enough to see his face, usually so controlled, now raw with relief and lingering terror. "I had to," she said simply. "He's my family." Ethan's eyes searched hers for a long moment before he nodded, understanding passing between them. Family was everything in their world. It was what drove them, what bound them, what they protected at all costs. And somehow, against all odds, they had become each other's family too. 1 year later, the Hayes-Davidson alliance had transformed Seattle's underworld landscape. What had begun as a forced partnership had evolved into a powerful coalition that controlled the city's key operations from the waterfront to the eastern suburbs. The Wrights were a distant memory, Gerald serving time for kidnapping and attempted murder, while Marcus had fled the city, rumors placing him somewhere in Alaska. On a clear spring evening, the top floor of the Columbia Center played host to a private celebration. Hayes Investment Partners had just completed its most successful quarter to date, with the joint ventures overseen by Megan's division accounting for 60% of the growth. The event was a carefully orchestrated blend of legitimate business and family operations. Politicians mingled with Davidson lieutenants, bankers chatted with Hayes enforcers, all under the guise of a corporate celebration. Megan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sunset paint Seattle's skyline in shades of gold and crimson. Her reflection showed a woman transformed from the heartbroken, impulsive accountant of a year ago. She now carried herself with the confidence of someone who had faced down death and emerged stronger, her position as director of joint operations giving her a power base entirely her own. "Beautiful view," came a familiar voice from behind her. She turned to find her father approaching, pride evident in his eyes as he took in the gathering, a testament to what his daughter had helped build. "It is," she agreed, "though I never thought I'd be watching it from this perspective." Daniel Davidson handed her a glass of champagne. "Life rarely takes us where we expect. Sometimes it takes a wrong turn to find the right path." They both knew he wasn't just talking about her career. Across the room, Ethan was engaged in conversation with Robert Davidson and several city officials, the three men laughing with the easy camaraderie of trusted allies. "How are things with him?" her father asked, nodding toward Ethan. "Really?" Megan considered the question. Her relationship with Ethan had evolved in ways neither of them could have predicted. What had begun as antagonism, then a wary alliance, had deepened into something complex and powerful. They challenged each other, respected each other, and protected each other with a fierce devotion that had survived the crucible of family politics and violence. "Complicated," she admitted, "but good complicated." Her father nodded, understanding the nuances she left unspoken. In their world, personal relationships were always entangled with business and family loyalties. The fact that she and Ethan had managed to build something genuine amidst those competing forces was nothing short of remarkable. "He reminds me of you, actually," she added with a small smile. "Stubborn, protective, always 3 moves ahead." Her father chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." His expression grew more serious. "Just remember who you are, Megan. You're a Davidson first." Before she could respond, Ethan approached, nodding respectfully to Daniel before turning to Megan. "May I borrow your daughter for a moment?" he asked. Daniel clasped Ethan's shoulder briefly, a gesture of trust that would have been unthinkable a year ago, before moving away to join Robert. Ethan led Megan to a private corner of the room, away from prying eyes and ears. In these moments when they were alone, even in a crowded room, the masks they wore for others slipped away. No power plays, no family politics, just 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "It's not my birthday," she replied, curious. "Consider it an anniversary gift." "Anniversary?" His lips curved into that rare, genuine smile that still made her heart skip. "1 year ago today, you walked into the Emerald Lounge and turned my world upside down." He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a key. "What's this for?" she asked, confused. "A house on Bainbridge Island," he explained. "Waterfront property, completely neutral territory. Not Hayes, not Davidson, just ours." The implications hit her immediately. A shared space, away from both families' territories, a place that belonged only to them, where they could simply be Ethan and Megan, not heirs to rival organizations. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" she asked, her voice soft with surprise. "I'm asking for more than that," he replied, his gray eyes serious as they held hers. "I'm asking you to consider a different kind of partnership, one that's just about us, not about business or family alliances." It wasn't a conventional proposal, but then nothing about their relationship had ever been conventional. It was a question asked in the language they both understood, one of territory and boundaries, of shared spaces and mutual trust. Megan closed her hand around the key, feeling its weight, the promise of a future she'd never imagined possible after that fateful night at the Emerald Lounge. "Yes," she said simply. His smile widened, genuine joy lighting his features in a way few people ever witnessed. He leaned down and kissed her, a public acknowledgement of what many had suspected but few had confirmed, that the kiss that had started a family war had ultimately led to an unexpected peace. Later that evening, as they stood together greeting guests, Robert Davidson approached, clapping Ethan on the shoulder with the familiarity of a trusted ally. "Quite the empire you two have built," he observed, gesturing to the gathered crowd. "We've all built it," Megan corrected. "Hayes and Davidson together." Robert's eyes twinkled with knowing amusement. "Yes. And all because you decided to teach Marcus a lesson. Sometimes the best business decisions start with the heart, not the head." As he moved away, Ethan's arm slipped around Megan's waist, his touch possessive, yet respectful of her independence, a balance they had fought hard to achieve. "He's right, you know," Ethan murmured against her ear. "Best impulsive decision anyone ever made." Megan laughed, leaning into his embrace as they surveyed the empire they had forged together, not through calculated strategy or cold ambition, but through an unexpected kiss that had changed everything.